This is another episode of Media Camp. I'm Sergey Ross, and I'm here with Allie LeFevere. Allie, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me about you recently launched your podcast, the second one. Tell me
Yes.
how did that go?
Yeah, it's great. We launched the trailer in July, and we've been steadily recording interviews. So the podcast is Brand Splaining, and the whole premise of Brand Splaining is it's business casual conversations for entrepreneurs who need to be the center of attention. So because our agency is built on fun and humor and levity, and really taking that approach into branding and creative, we decided we wanted to talk to entrepreneurs and brand strategists and marketers and CMOs, et cetera, folks who are really leading some of the world's most notorious and memorable brands, and talk to them about their creative process and why they went left when everyone else in their industry went right. But we wanted to move away from the non-traditional interview format. So there is a little bit of Q&A, but I would say it's quite different than a lot of the standard business questions, because we wanted to infuse levity and play into it. And then we do fun games. And it's so delightful. It's so fun. I feel like we get to draw out the best in our audience, and it's been really good. We have 8 interviews under our belt already, and they're in the editing process now, and we're going to start rolling them out in a few weeks.
That's great. I
Yeah.
was just gonna say, because I would assume you did something different to differentiate yourself, because there's so many shows to talk about entrepreneurs, interview entrepreneurs, and all of their paths. But you just considering what you're doing with your agency, you would like come up with a different angle.
Yeah, we did, and we've had a chance to so far talk to some awesome brands. We've spoken with Aviation Gin and Tushy and Thinks and Girls Night In, and just folks who are doing really surprising and entertaining and engaging things in their industry. And it's been great, because we hem-hawed on an interview and a podcast format and style for a really long time, because we didn't want to roll out something that felt like a slog, that felt like we were going to hit the same topics. So we really niched down, and we figured we would talk to folks about the thing that we love the most about branding and marketing, which is how to make it memorable and wild and surprising and something people talk about.
Do you ask them any questions that stand out, like any weird questions, any hypothetical questions that would be, just bring them a little bit of, just show the other side of them to the audience? Do you do any of that besides the fun factor, right?
Yeah, well, we tailor all of our questions to the guest, which is really fun. So we have this back catalog of like 40 questions, and then we tweak we don't ask that many. We ask about like 8, let's say. But we start with kind of our list. We look at who do we think would, what questions would draw out the best dialogue from these guests, and then we customize them. But some fun things that we've been doing, one of the little fun quirks of the podcast so far is in the intake process, when we're asking folks just questions about their company and their role and creative projects and all of that, so kind of getting ourselves prepped and ready for the interview. We always ask people about a really embarrassing situation and that they feel like comfortable talking about now, and then we always kick off the interview framing the first question around that embarrassing moment, and it makes people laugh, and it loosens them right up, and it just shakes them out of the nervousness of an interview. Because even though some folks are very often in the public eye, there's a lot of people who are brand directors and creatives and CMOs who are not public facing, and they got a ton of nerves when they're about to be interviewed. And so we try to kick off with 2 to 3 really playful, silly, funny questions that'll get them relaxed, so they can just have fun and be comfortable and enjoy the rest of the interview.
That's a great hook. That's a very good hook.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's also very custom, which is great. You know what it reminds me? We have so I'm in Toronto, Canada, and we have this meetup. Well, we had a meetup when we were able to go outside.
Yeah.
It's called Fuck Up Nights. And Fuck Up Nights was essentially, it's like for entrepreneurs, and you get there and then somebody tells their fuck up, and you hear some crazy stories. And it was interesting. There's so many other meetups like that in Toronto, but that one gets like 5 times, 10 times more attendance because it's so
Oh
much
yeah.
fun. It's this weird stories that are funny, and then you can still learn something from it. So that mix that you are also working on, like having this like fun aspect of brand is so effective. It just draws a lot more people in because it's like, look, event is at 6 p.m. You probably did something already. You want to have a little bit of a laugh. You don't want to hear about 10 steps of how to get to your $10 million valuation, which is fine. There's a place for that, but like, can we just get something to just laugh a little bit?
Yeah, I first of all, I love that name. Fuck Up Nights it's so memorable and it's really funny. And you already know it's going to make you laugh and smile and have a silly goose time because yeah, and that's what it is. It's like I think it's very human to talk about the times we were uncomfortable, especially when we're far past it, where we can reflect back and laugh really hard about those moments. And so I love that because I think it draws out just the best parts of people and it's relatable and it's humanizing. And yeah, I love that. I want to like steal that and bring that to Chicago. That's wonderful.
And you know what's interesting? They start their thing and saying, "Hey, we are not fucked up nights. We are not these and this and these names." And they go
Yeah.
through all the names because some people, they mispronounce it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a very funny format too. What about for you? Are you you obviously talk to the guest first, like, hey, this is like, are you okay to share a story? What kind of story you can share? You do a bit of a rehearsal, right?
Of course. And the way the question is framed, it's not deeply embarrassing things. It's like funny, silly, embarrassing little moments that they are willing to talk about and share. So they when they answer the question, they know it's something that we say that are you willing to share, but they're always surprised when it's the first thing we kick off the interview with. Because we joke around and we always say, we ask every question, or we ask every guest this question, and then we tailor the question very specifically to that story, and then everyone laughs because everyone's in on it, and then they tell this story, and again, it's a really warm entry into an interview.
Absolutely. This is a great hook. And speaking of
Thank
hooks,
you.
you obviously do a lot of humor marketing,
Yeah.
and it works very well. How do you, when you are starting to work with a client, what do you look for at first to understand, like, hey, this is the humor could work for you, the humor might not work for you, and then if it does, then let's start here to develop the hook and then develop the whole plan.
Yeah. Well, I'm a believer that humor and fun and levity and some variation of that can work with any industry and any business. The beauty of humor, as we think of it, as it's like there might be some people might have a very specific idea in their head in terms of what humor is, but we see it as like a very nuanced approach in terms of there are a million different tones and tactics you can take when leveraging humor in your brand. So that's everything from being very bold and direct and snarky. You can be self-deprecating, you can be clever and witty, you can be very subtle, you can be very dry, you can be very cynical. There's like a million different shades of it. You can be playful and silly and jokey and teasy. But so when we're working with any client, again, we believe that we will find a way to leverage it in some capacity. The biggest thing for us is we have something we call a consumer emotion strategy, where our whole intake process is trying to understand the audience, because we are working with brands and not people. So we want to develop a brand personality that will resonate and elicit the right response and the right reactions from their ideal audience. So what we care about is, how does their audience feel? What does their audience care about? What matters to them? What are they going to react to? How are they going to feel when we say XYZ about their brand? So we go into every project with the first piece deeply trying to understand the brand from the perspective of whoever we're working with, and then we deeply care about the audience. We care about the competitor landscape, because if there's already someone in your industry that's leveraging humor in some capacity, we're certainly not going to replicate that. We're gonna find your own lane, but it's more than just coming up with funny things to say on behalf of your brand. Again, it's deeply rooted in you've used the word, but we develop a hook. So what's the through line of your business? When we distill your business down to kind of one core essential message, what is it? So a hook can often be a tagline, it can be a slogan, Doesn't have to be. It's just that foundational starting point when we talk about your business, what is the thing that's going to matter the most to your audience? What's going to resonate with them? And then how do we say it in a way that they're going to be able to hear it and respond to it? And it's such a fun process because there's sometimes we play around with different tones and styles once we've really landed on that hook. And then there's just kind of this gut moment where we go, you know what, this is the right lane. Like, this is the one that's going to land. This is the one that's going to, people are going to respond to. Now, we're not trying to please everyone. The beauty of picking a lane in any area of your business is it's good to be a little polarizing. It's good to have certain people really respond to you and other people know that you are not for them, because then the people that do respond to you and do engage with you and do share about you and talk about you and buy from you, those are your ride or die folks. Those are the people who love you. And if you're speaking directly to them and speaking for them, then that's when you really start to build brand loyalty and notoriety.
Right. No, that absolutely makes sense. Where it's just finding that insight that would resonate with your audience. And how do you do that? Like, do you? I'm pretty certain you wouldn't be an agency that would say, "Hey, let's go read these reports." That's probably not where you start. Where would you go to start off? Like, here are the customers. How do we find what they are interested in, what they're into, and how would they react after you come up with a few ideas?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is that myself and my business partner and our team members have been in this space in some capacity for 10 plus years. So I think we have a really good pulse on branding and marketing and copywriting especially. And we, you know, we have a comedy background in some sense. So we have kind of all that training of improv and comedy writing and in our back pocket. So that's kind of one piece. The other piece is that you know, we again are deeply looking into the audience, the audience of our client. So again, we're gathering all this information and gathering all this data about them, but it's not just it's not demographic data. That is kind of less important in terms of what we care about. We care about you know, emotion. You know, we call it audience psyche. Like, what is the mindset of your consumer? And so once our client is sharing information about their audience and those segments, and we're further exploring it and we're asking, I mean, we have a very robust intake process that we haven't had one client go through it yet that didn't say, wow, that was pretty hard.
And what would that be? Would that be more like conversations with the clients directly, or would that be phone calls? What would that look like?
So
Like in terms of the interaction?
yeah, well, we start with a questionnaire. So we want them to dump all of their thoughts down on paper. You know, obviously it's an intake questionnaire, so it's very organized and there's a specific flow to it and questions build on each other. And then I always get on a call with folks after, so we can distill that information down, and I can poke holes in it and I can understand, well, what did you mean by that? Or that was a pretty vague answer. Can you say that to me in layman's terms? Or that sounds like a platitude. Like, if you were talking to the average Joe, how would you say it? And so we're trying to get to the more human side of their brand. Again, their audience, what they care about, what matters to them, what drives them, what are they afraid of, what are they thinking about, what are they sick of hearing about, trying to really deeply understand them so that we can treat their business as a person, where we're developing a personality that would really connect with their consumer. And so, yeah, it's like a really, I mean, it's a very multi-tiered, robust process, but it's a very human process because ultimately we're trying to humanize brands. Because, you know, I think for so long, brands have either taken an approach that's very boring and watered down and plays to the masses, and they're trying to be for everyone, which makes them kind of for no one, which is why there's a lack of brand loyalty to some degree. So there's kind of that camp, or there's a camp that have used a very effective tool that we don't utilize, but that is preying on insecurities, preying on fears, digging into pain points. And we want to understand all those things, but we want to play to the pain points, not prey on them, and not make someone feel bad and empty and in order to get a sale, right? Like we don't play
Right.
that game on behalf of our clients. So that's not how we approach any of the creative components. And so yeah, it's a really delightful process that I think when you humanize a brand that way, and your consumers like you and they trust you and they know you and they feel good in your presence, like they stick around for the long haul, because people want to be in the presence of things that make them feel good, and that is brands included. And
Absolutely.
so if you play that game, it yields really delightful results.
How many customers do you want to talk to that when you're satisfied? Like how many on average would you say, you know what, this is enough. We don't have to keep going.
I mean, I don't know if there's like a specific number, but we're always trying to think of the people who are the ride or die core base. And we haven't met a client yet who hasn't had a decent understanding of who those people are. I think sometimes we have to rein our clients in a little bit, and they start talking really excitedly and enthusiastically about these customers who they're their first customers. They've come back and purchased multiple products. They talk about them, they share about them, like they're their biggest brand enthusiasts. And then what happens is they want to then start to water that down, or wait, that could be my audience, or that could be my audience. And so what we do is we really focus on that core consumer base, and then we might have some messaging that is an extension of the foundational messaging that might draw in or talk to or speak to some of these other adjacent consumer bases, just to see, like, are these people, can these people be more engaged with your brand? Is there a way to frame the messaging or speak to them that resonates or that they respond and react to? So we definitely play with that too, but we're really fixated on that ride or die base, because those are the people who are going to be, a brand evangelist. They're going to be the people that share on social media. They're going to be the people that give you good feedback. Yeah. So
The super
those are the
fans.
folks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What about what are some of the common traits? What connects the clients that you work with together? Because there's got to be certain thing where, like, you know what, yeah, they are okay to use humor. They like humor. They like, you know what, let's go try to use humor and maybe get some results. Because some companies would be totally against that, that's how they think about it. But what are some of the characteristics you'd say folks who you work with?
Well, I would say that it is folks who are willing to be a little uncomfortable in the branding process, because we have to do something different than what else is out there. We have to shake things up a little bit. We have to dissent from your industry. We have to dissent from your competitors. So I think it's people who are willing to be a little bit avant-garde. They're willing to push boundaries. They're willing to be a little polarizing. Now, when I say polarizing, we don't really play in shock value humor. I don't personally like shock value. My business partner doesn't, so we never do that type of humor, or the lowest hanging fruit humor. Like, that's just not our style.
What would be the shock value? What would be the example just for the audience?
A lot of swearing or saying things that are
Right.
deliberately confrontational, just for the sake of getting a reaction and response out of people. Or like really low hanging fruit. Like, if it's the first piece of copy you think of, it's the easiest copy to think of, and that's something we throw out. So I would say that, like, our clients they know the value of differentiating in their industry. They know the value of getting eyes and attention on their brand. They know the value of, again, being willing to not be a copycat, to not just be a sheep following along with the herd. So, and it's really awesome to see. I mean, I I'm not gonna lie, I definitely end up playing coach a little bit.
Of course.
Just because it can be scary when you start to start to want to roll things out. But we've yielded some awesome results, and then I think once they start to get the response and reaction, then they take a breath of fresh air. They're like, oh, okay, people are gonna like it. But yeah, it can be a little scary for folks.
Where do you find inspiration, and where would you recommend for people to find inspiration who want to try humor in their marketing? Maybe they're marketers right now, maybe they're building their personal brand. Where do you think they should be looking at, or trying to implement it, maybe certain practices they can apply to just start just testing it?
Yeah, well, I would say that if you're a personal brand, then you have to look within in terms of your own personality and the things that you respond to and react to, because you are your brand, so you can't really cultivate a brand personality in the same way. You have to really just show up in an integral, authentic way. I believe that to be across all brands, whether it's personal or corporate. But I think that that's very different than a corporation. Um, but in terms of corporate brands, I definitely think that, first of all, I think you have to be honest with yourself and say, like, do you have the skill set to execute that? Because just because you might think something's funny personally doesn't necessarily mean it's right for your brand. I mean, a lot of times we see brands who are not cohesive or don't really have any connective tissue in their messaging, and that just try to hop on bandwagons on social media, and it doesn't really land. They try to wedge their product or their offering in these kind of pop culture zeitgeisty moments, and it often falls flat and it feels very disjointed and disconnected. So I really do think, like, it's either bringing in an expert who really can have a strong understanding of branding and marketing and how to resonate and reach an audience, or if you have someone on your team, awesome. But I would say that, start to look at, I would look at folks in your industry who have strong branding, just to see, like, what are people reacting and responding to. But you absolutely do not want to copy any shred of that. I think it's just good to see what else is happening in your industry. I think it could be helpful to look at adjacent industries, or maybe industries that have nothing to do with your brand, that you seem to have maybe a slight overlap in an audience base, to see how are they presenting and how are they shaping their brand. Again, you're not going to copy, you're not going to replicate, but just as inspiration and fodder. Um, but I think the biggest thing that I think is often a misstep is that people are just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And I think that's a misconception with humor that's done really well, and fun and levity that's
Mhm.
done really well. And just like you see a stand-up act and you think it's so funny and so seamless, like, those jokes have been written and rehearsed and practiced for a solid year. They're cohesive, they're telling a narrative, there's a story there, like, it's timing, it's understanding your audience, it's tweaking, it's all of that. Because and that's something that we think about when we think about branding, is that it's not about a quick hit joke. Like, we kill our darlings all the time if it doesn't work with the foundational hook of the brand, if it's not a cohesive part of the brand personality. For example, if the brand is very dry in tone in terms of how we develop it, we're not gonna do a really silly, even if we love it, a really silly piece of copy that we think is hilarious and wonderful. It doesn't work with the brand, and so we
Oh,
have to
because
cut it.
you'll be obviously looking at the previous stuff that they have shipped before. Like, you want to account for that too. Like, you don't want to just flip a page and say, hey, brand new from today. It's You still want to have certain correlation to what's been done before.
Well, to some degree, right? I mean, there's some time, like, we want to have a consistent brand experience, and we don't want it to feel out of left field. I guess I more mean with, if we're developing initial branding for someone down
Oh,
the
from scratch.
road, we're not gonna flip it around and all of a sudden start wedging in other pieces of copy that just don't work cohesively. And I think, like, that's what happens when it becomes very DIY'd. Um, the so yeah, so that would be just one thing I say. I
Hmm.
don't mean to be a downer to say you can't do it on your own, but I do think that, my business partner and I talk about this all the time, is that often design is treated with a lot more respect, because you design within a platform. It feels like a skill set most people don't have. But then, because everyone writes in some capacity every day, whether it's text messages, on social media, everyone thinks they can just do it well.
Of course,
But
like with marketing.
right. Yeah. It's like, just because you can do one part of it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the expertise in it. And I'm not saying that to just heighten my own expertise, but that it is a difference. And so you have to approach your own brand um, cohesively. There has to be connective tissue. You have to draw, all of your copy and messaging should tie back to some core key element and foundational piece of your brand. Um, Now, I'm going very long-winded on this, but I want to just hit on one last point. I think if you're going to test the waters with humor, levity, play, cleverness, witticisms, whatever, some nice places to start are social ads. That's a really nice place to get people to pay attention to your brand and to drive traffic. So you can start to play with you can start to step out of your comfort zone and play a little bit with your tone of voice and your brand's personality and like that. Or email marketing is a really fun place to play and flex and have a little fun. But then again, ultimately, all those things drive back to your home base, which is your point of sale, which is often people's their website, which is their digital presence. So you don't want it to feel abrupt or to feel like a 180 when people get back to your site and it's like dry, boring, and it feels like a totally different brand. So, but there are little places you can start to dip your toe in the water that you can start to see how people react and respond.
What about yourself, Allie? What do you look for in inspiration just to keep yourself sharp, keep yourself, because you need a lot of ideas. You got to have the repository of ideas with pretty much any creative work, especially the type of work that you're doing. What do you do? It's probably going to be like unprofessionally or just like on the weekend to get that.
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing is I'm a huge comedy fan. I think the thing about comedy I think is so beautiful is it's such a humanizing experience. I think if you can make people laugh or smile or feel good, it does so much more than elicit a happy, joyful response. It also, again, like it can be very humanizing. It can make a complex idea feel very digestible and very easy to navigate. It can take something that's very mundane and dry and make it more entertaining. So I look to comedians who are observers of humanity and who do a really good job of distilling these complicated, complex thoughts into really pithy, witty, clever ideas. I consume a lot of stand-up acts and comedic shows and comedic writing and
Who do you like? Who do you follow? Who are
oh
the
my
favorites?
God, there's so many people I love. I listen to a lot of different styles because like I watch and listen to everyone from like the very slapsticky impractical jokers, which is a very silly, teasy type of humor, to like someone who's a little bit more bold, like a Whitney Cummings, someone who has a little bit more dry delivery, like Jerry Seinfeld or Sebastian Maniscalco. I
Oh,
love,
he's a good one. I
yeah,
like him a lot.
yeah, I'm Italian and all my family's obsessed with him. So I also I love Schitt's Creek. I love The Good Place. I love The Office. I love Parks and Rec. I mean, kind of anything by Mike Schur is a delight. I listen to a ton of comedy podcasts. I really like the podcast Good One, which is the host invites a comic on to break down one of their jokes in terms of how they approached it. What are the tweaks and changes they make. So kind of that's all the comedy consumption that like me and our team does, but I also just read a ton because I think words are just the most powerful tool you can leverage. And I love poetry. I love novels. I love language. I subscribe to this daily newsletter where it shares like unfamiliar words with you. And so I love that because it gets my brain expanding and go, oh, that's a way to say that in a way I'm not familiar with or I haven't really heard before. So yeah, I just love all of that. I'm like a word freak.
It's like an app where you have like a new word per day, like something like an unknown word a day, right?
Yeah, a word of the day. Yeah.
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 Have you tried? You probably have tried. You mentioned it, improv. You have tried comedy before, have you?
So I've done improv before. There's not a single bone in my body that has any desire to be in comedy in any sort of stand-up form. I've never done that, practiced that, desired that.
Why
But
not?
I just I don't know. I mean, I'm very outgoing and extroverted, but I don't really care if I have a spotlight. That's like, I really like I like creating for the sake of creating. It's just like a fun, delightful experience. So I like creating internal obedience stuff, and I like creating on behalf of clients. I don't mind doing it behind the scenes and just getting to like revel in it that way. I get some improv out of my system with my other really very silly podcasts that I do with my co-founder of my agency and one of my buddies. So I do like improv. I love riffing and I love teasing and just playing with my friends. So that's fun. But yeah, I love enjoying stand up. I've never had a desire to do
But
that.
not being on stage, not being on stage, and I mean it's a bit intimidating for sure. But like doing that on stage would not a part of the plan.
Yeah, I think I'm too fragile for it. As thick a skin as I've developed in some ways, when it comes to like, pushing back with clients. Um, yeah, I don't think my poor soul could take being in front of 10,000 people and them reacting to me real time. I just don't think I could take it.
Or not reacting, which is actually probably the
Oh
worst.
God, which would be the worst. Someone being indifferent or hate what you're saying. Oh, I couldn't do it.
Ali, how did this whole idea of the agency and like the agency with this angle came about?
Yeah, I mean, well, myself, my background was I worked at consulting firms for many years, and then I worked at a startup. I was a VP of engagement, so I developed, I guess I developed the brand's personality before that was really a thing in my mind. I was developing the consumer engagement strategy. How, what's the voice and what are the visuals we need to develop in order for our audience to like our startup, our product. And so I did that for about a year. And we were one of the first subscription box companies on the market, kind of in their
Mhm.
heyday. I think they've hit a second wave, but back in the day when they first came out, and that was my real first foray into like overseeing the kind of the brand strategy and like really developing all of that from scratch and testing out my copywriting chops. And I had always thought of myself as a very strong writer, but I had never really deployed it in any sort of branding or marketing capacity. And so that was really fun. I can remember when I was working there, it was the first time I felt like a thrill when I would get to do my work. Cause I was like, oh my God, this is a thing I love and I'm good at, and I get to create and I get to play and I get to see how people respond and react. So that was a riot. And then I went on my own for a while, and I was doing brand strategy and development and program development for folks. And so I was actually building out sales funnels for people in terms of, what's the messaging, what's the sales page need to be, and what are all the messages we have to communicate along the way to get people to that end goal and end result. And I was deploying humor and I was using levity, but I didn't really like the process. I felt like it was smarmy.
Mm.
And even though like I felt like the approach I was taking was a very delightful, refreshing, surprising approach, I still didn't really love that whole sales funnel process kind of in the more traditional way. But I was doing brand development and creating these this messaging of these sales funnels for folks. And then Lindsay, my co-founder of my agency, she was my best friend, and she was a copywriter and comedy writer. And we would just kind of, shoot the shit and talk about how, our approach to branding and marketing and what worked and what we liked and what we didn't. And we started to just talk about that we really love this fun, levity, place-centric approach. We thought it was really effective. We didn't really see people doing it. And so we started to partner on some projects just on the side of our regular thing. And we loved it. We're like, oh my God, look, I want to work with you every single day. I can't get enough. We can't get enough of each other. And so we decided, hey, what if we did this for our main thing? What if we built an entire agency around this idea that fun sells, that there is a better, more powerful, positive way to approach branding and marketing? Like, what if we could disrupt our industry, and instead of preying on our consumers' pain points, we could delight them instead? And that's where Obedient came from. And it's been about 4 years, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, I wake up, it sounds so cheesy, but I literally wake up every day excited to work, and I never, ever really felt like that. Um, I get to work with my best friend. Our team is hilarious. They're really talented. I get to do cool shit all day. It's hard work too, right? Don't get me wrong, but man, like I get to laugh for a living, and that's the dream.
No, it doesn't sound cheesy. I mean, I think once you do something that you really enjoy, and you have done something you really hate, or maybe you are doing something that you really hate, and you have something that's like a side hustle that you really enjoy, it's very easy to feel the difference. Like
Oh
just
yeah.
the thought of like, oh my god, I have to do this another thing, I have to write this boring copy that nobody's gonna read, or like this, like it just like doesn't make any sense. Like why we're saying it, like with all those weird words. Like it just like nobody. You don't want to do any of that.
Oh gosh, no. It's and like also I'm not a big fan of long form copy when it's like super long-winded and you're trying to wedge every thought and idea onto a page. And I feel like that was kind of my world a little bit more before Obedient, is that trying to, clients wanting me to say everything about their brand instead of distilling it down to the most important things. And what happens if you if you can't say the important thing in 10 words or less, then you don't know what the important thing is. And if you think a if you think a client, or I'm sorry, if you think what your consumer is going to read 10,000 words and they're going to figure out what that important thing is, you're like out of your mind.
Well, you
So
better
like,
you better offer the product that only you have that everybody really wants. Which I don't even know any any examples.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to be like the only one. You have to be like the Tesla in your market, and then you can do whatever the hell you want. But other than that, it's pretty tough to take that approach these days.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Ellie, do you have any customer stories maybe that were not super successful that you haven't publicly shared before that you would be comfortable sharing right now? Anything that probably are some early experiences, because I know that when you start out there, they're always you say yes to jobs and you get really weird clients. Just it happens
Yeah.
with an agency, and sometimes it doesn't go very well, especially when you're just like owning the process, owning your craft. I wonder if there are any stories that you would like to walk us through.
Okay, I can tell you a funny story. It just came to my head. So we had this one client this one time that very cool product, and we were tasked. One of the things we were tasked with was naming it. They were going through a rebrand. And naming, I think, is the hardest thing we do because naming is very subjective. So we could come up with, we think are the best names on the planet. And if a client personally doesn't resonate with it, it doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how unique and how spot on we got it. Like it is just one of the few things that they're either gonna like it or not, and that's it. You could tap dance, you could put on a whole dog and pony show, and try to convince them otherwise, and like you just lock into a name and that's it. And I'm like that too with our own
Mhm.
stuff, so I get it. So I'm empathetic toward it. Okay, so we did this project, and I think it was some of the best names we've ever come up with this with for a client, because they were just, it was such an easy, it was such a it was a very saturated market, but this market didn't have a lot of like really memorable, punchy, cool names. And so presented round one, they really liked round one, and then we always do a second round after we get
Mhm.
feedback. And so we get to the end, and the client wants us to give them more, and we're like, well, you already only paid for two rounds, and so if you want to do, we don't recommend you doing any more rounds at this stage. We think you should test out some of these names, run it by your key your core consumers, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, I'm just giving a little bit of backstory.
For sure.
And they, to be honest, they were very, very difficult client that we ended up cutting our project short because they were kind of a nightmare. But long story short, so things got a little tense because they didn't want to pay. They wanted us to do more work. They didn't really have any good reason why they wanted more names. They just wanted more names for the sake of it. They weren't even willing to like do any of the testing or exploration of the names we gave them. Okay, so So I'm like, oh man, I was like feeling so bummed out, me and Lindsay. I'm like, God, we've never really had this before. Like having this like weird tension between a client. How do we get them back on our side? Like, how do we get them to like treat us like humans again? Because they were like, we tried to call them, they wouldn't answer. It was just, they would like set fire off these weird emails. It just was, also the guy that was our point of contact, he was pretty toxic. It was just like a funky situation. Anyway, I know I'm like giving a lot of backstory. I feel like my mother, she's so long-winded. But so what we decided to do is we decided to write an email to them that peppered in every name that we gave them in a really funny way. So it was a email that was meant to kind of win their hearts back. And so we wove in every name we delivered into this email, and it was really funny. And we're like, oh my God, this is either going to hit and be like, it's just going to turn this relationship around, or it's going to bomb. And it landed. Like, and I know this is supposed to be a fail, but like the project was an overall fail because it didn't work out. But like, we took a big risk in trying to win their hearts back by using humor. We're like, oh, we have to use humor to get them back in our good graces so we can like wrap up parts of this project. Anyway, it warmed them up enough, and they laughed, they responded, they said, that's so clever, that's so witty. And it got them to like reevaluate the names. It got them to like re-engage with us. It got them to allow us to take them to the finish line in terms of this project we were doing. And they ended up using a variation of one of the names. And so it overall, like, I'm trying to tell this story because like, I told this story because there can be really tense, crappy, frustrating moments in client relationships. They happen to everyone. And like, I just wanted to kind of tie it in a bow to say like, you can use humor to do a lot of heavy lifting sometimes. And that was one of the ways where we took like a huge overarching failure of a client relationship, and we at the end we turned it around slightly because we were able to deploy humor in a funny way. So yeah, but that it sucks when a client isn't a good match. I mean, that's just sometimes that happens. And
it's so hard to know, right? Like so hard to know when. You have to. The best advice I've heard on this is you have to evaluate each client on the assholeness scale. On the assholeness scale is 1 to 10, and if it's above 3, you do not work with them, because there's this perception if the client is 10 out of 10 asshole, and if he pays you 10 out of 10 money, then it's okay to work with him. And anyone who did the work for those folks has a good answer, and it's not true. Like, that doesn't matter how much they pay you. You don't want to be like the mental drain, like this weirdness. It's just not worth the money.
I agree with you. In fairness, I kind of knew they were an asshole going into this, but I can sometimes be delusional to think I can like win anyone over if I'm nice enough to them. And I think that's my slight delusion going into this project. But they were, upfront. I mean, trying to strong arm us on prices, and we don't compete price wise. I don't want to work for peanuts. Like, if you do something that you're proud of and it's a unique skill set and you've worked really hard your whole life to be great at it, I'm not going to do it for half the price just because you're threatening to take the project away. Like, I don't want to play that game. So that was part of it initially. And then day one, when the project kicked off, I started getting texts at 5 a.m. on my personal cell phone. Like, here's what we're going to do. And I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a nightmare from this guy. But anyway, but it's funny that you say the asshole scale, because we have like an internal ranking system. We have like 6 different categories. And when a new project comes in, we don't do like a very formal evaluation, but we kind of run it through this like 6 category system to say like, a couple of them are like, is it a product or service that we're like super stoked about? Are they the only one in their industry that is doing it? So we could go like hog wild and have fun. Are they a referral? So we know they've come from like a really like delightful former client or someone we know that we trust. Is the money good? Like and like you have to hit 4 to 5 out of those 6. Otherwise it's like, how you can't even enjoy you can't do a great job if you're working under constrained parameters.
When I think about my when I started off as a consultant and doing contract work, most of the time the worst project I did were the lowest paying ones. They were
Yes.
just like they were like paid terribly, and the clients you end up attracting, like there's this perception of, oh, I'm just going to lower the price and it's going to be fine, but that's not actually what happens. You attract a client that is bargaining with you for like $2, and then they don't really understand it. They're probably so budget tight that even if you hit a home run, they will say, okay, cool. They will never you don't have any opportunities for them, and they're really terrible to work with too, because anything that you have a bit of an upsell, maybe you need another tool, maybe you need something else, it's a hard climb. You're never gonna get there.
Yeah.
So like overall it sucks, but then you're like, oh, it makes sense. I gotta start. So it's just in that position where you have limited social proof, you end up being in that spot that you kind of attract the wrong people.
I completely agree with you, Sergey. Uh, it's I think that if people are trying to nickel and dime you, they don't really value what you're offering, and so they're going to devalue every part of your process. They're going to devalue your humanity. They're going to devalue your creative output. They're going to devalue your time, and it's I mean it's a burnout process. And there has never been a project that we have lowered our prices for that has ever not been a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just always the nightmares. It is. And so, I don't think you should ever inflate your prices beyond your skill set or capabilities. But, and I do think there are times like we took on a project one time that the gal ended up actually being a true delight. And it was a nonprofit and it was a cause we deeply cared about. And so we were willing to do the work because we believed in what she was cultivating. So you have to make those choices. But like overall, if someone is only hammering you on price, then they're going to be problematic generally.
definitely, yeah. It's a hard balance. I think you get better with experience and with having
Mm-hmm.
certain evaluation criteria. Because I even remember now, like I had a project and folks reached out to me like, hey, can you help with this demand generation project? It's like Facebook ads, maybe a few landing pages, and we have this startup, we have this product, and this was right when the lockdown happened. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we can quote them. I know they will pay, and it came through the referral. But then I did the scale calculation and I looked at it, and I'm like, the chances of me succeeding is extremely low, because it just doesn't make any sense. They are selling retail product for folks who are painting walls in homes. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the color, like a colorimeter, like this thing
Mm.
that measures the color of walls, which is like, okay, cool. So it's a retail product, but then there's no construction, there's no repair, nobody's painting walls right now when the lockdown is happening. So how
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hell are
yeah.
you gonna sell it? I'm like, doesn't make sense. I'm like, no, I can't help you. I know, but it's like this is just those things you have to evaluate. Where it's tempting, but the math is important. The process is really important.
I agree. I know. I think and I'm glad that you have enough self awareness to have stepped back from that, because I think it's, especially right now, it is a scary time for a lot of folks, and it can be, money can be tight, and there's a lot of industries that get hurt first, and when there's an economic downturn, like we've been fortunate to have a lot of carryover clients, but marketing and branding isn't the first thing people are thinking they need, even though it could be so beneficial and helpful during times like this. So I applaud you for kind of maintaining your integrity in the process, even in times like this.
Yeah, thank you. That was later in the process, because before I would have
Yeah.
like, yes, oh my god, I'm
Yeah.
taking it.
Yeah. I hear you. I get it. I get it.
Ellie, any final messages to the audience? Something I haven't asked you that you wish I did? Maybe any book or any resources recommendations that you'd think you'd want to leave the audience with?
Gosh, I think one last thing I would say is that I think don't be afraid to niche down in your industry. If you can really drill down to the very specific thing you do or you offer or you provide, I think that there's a lot more likelihood that your audience will be attracted to you and will remember you and talk about you when they need this specific thing. I think a lot of businesses make the mistake of trying to offer everything and do everything and promise everything, and then they're not really known for anything. And the worst thing your consumer can feel about you is indifferent. I mean, they should know exactly who you are, exactly what you stand for, exactly what you're about, exactly what you offer, exactly how you would benefit them, exactly what value you provide. So I think like that's a really important piece. It can be very scary to do that, but I just have always seen it be a more successful road if it's done in a thoughtful, well executed way. So that's one last thing I would say. The other thing I would say is don't get too caught up in big social media numbers and thinking that's the best way to be to indicate how successful a brand is. There's a lot of brands and products and entrepreneurs out there buying followers just to hype up what they do. I mean, you can take a quick look at how many people like their stuff, and it's like they have 30,000 followers and 3 likes. So I only say that because I think people get really caught up on thinking that the perception of more is better. And if you do good work for a handful of people to start and really maintain your integrity through the process, again, those people, they talk about you, they share about you, they refer you, and that's how you start to build a loyal following. None of those bots are buying. So yeah. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that. I think it's really easy to let social presence dictate how you run your business, but it's be the tortoise and not the hare. So yeah.
It's so misunderstood.
I know it is. And it's just, I don't know. It like breaks my heart, and I say that as someone who, we've grown, we don't have the hugest social presence, but we've grown through referrals and email marketing and podcast interviews and relationships we've built and all of that. And that's allowed us to continue to grow as an agency and not get caught up in kind of the smoke and mirrors. So
yeah, there are two main reasons, right? It's the shortcut mentality and it's the roadmap mentality. What's the fastest way? And then give me the steps. And it just doesn't work this way. Like you don't build relationships with your friends by hitting them up like, hey, are you buying? Like that doesn't work.
No. And you know what? I like, it breaks my heart because I feel like that's what everyone's looking for is like this quick hit, 6 steps to 6 figures in 6 hours type of mindset. But like all people end up doing is replicating someone else's process and system. So you end up looking like just a second tier version of someone else. And it doesn't work to build any sort of brand relationship. I mean, you might trick a couple people into your process, but like, does that feel good? Does that have shelf life? No. So I don't know. I can go on a whole separate tangent on that, but
that's good.
I won't end it in that way.
That would be a good episode. No, I know that will be a little dark especially for your brand.
I know. Keep it light.
Exactly. Allie, where's everybody can find you online?
Yeah, you can find our agency at Obedient Agency anywhere on social, obedientagency.com. You can find our podcast Brandsplaining at brandsplainingpod.com or Brandsplaining on anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we have our trailer up right now, and we're going to start launching episodes at some point in October. So keep your eyes and ears peeled.
Very cool. It was awesome chatting with you, Allie. Thank you so much for coming. That was fun.
Oh my gosh, you're so great. Thanks for having me on, Sergey. You're the best.